Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Nicholls. I'm the MPP for Chatham-Kent-Leamington. I'm also the Deputy Leader of the Ontario Party. Recently, I, in fact, read into the records of Queen's Park, yesterday, as a matter of fact, a petition. And we've had over 20,000 people, in fact, sign this petition online. Now, sadly, with the rules here at Queen's Park, basically indicate or state that we cannot accept online signatures. They have to be handwritten, but we do have enough of those as well. I'd like to take a moment and just read this particular petition to you. To the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Whereas Ontario is planning to introduce a comprehensive digital ID program that will centralize every person's personal, financial, business, medical, and social information and assign them an identification under this system. Whereas central banks in Canada and around the world are already developing digital currency to replace paper and coin money. And these digital currencies will be integrated into any digital ID program. And whereas the dangers of this new program poses to upholding civil liberties and privacy rights, and the clear opportunities for abuse of government authority it presents in terms of surveillance and compelled behavior, using access to basic resources as a tool of coercion, are ominous. They point towards progression to a dystopian, communist, Chinese-style social credit system. And whereas some Canadian citizens have already experienced some coercion through seized property and frozen bank accounts in retaliation for their having supported the Freedom Convoy protest, those acts having been justified by provincial and federal governments under the imposition of the Emergencies Act and declared state of emergency in Ontario. Therefore, we, the undersigned, petition the Legislative Assembly of Ontario as follows. 1. Insist that principles of data minimization, decentralization, consent, and limited access must be upheld in Ontario even as our world becomes increasingly digitalized. And 2. Demand that there be zero tolerance for the implementation of any digital ID program in Ontario, and that any government endeavor seeking to establish a system akin to the social credit system of Communist China be condemned, halted, and banned. That was the petition that I read into record yesterday here in the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Now, I mentioned in this particular petition that there was a fact that Trudeau actually froze bank accounts. And we have with us today a gentleman, he's actually one of our candidate in Peterborough-Kawartha. His name is Tom Marazzo. And Tom was actually victimized by Trudeau because he had his bank account frozen. But there were many, many more. So we're glad to have Tom with us today. And also, and I'm going to introduce the leader of the Ontario Party in just one moment, but I need to preface everything, first of all, by this. You know, we've been talking about digital ID, and I'm going to tell you right now, the government is going to sell you a bill of goods. They're going to tell you how wonderful it is, how convenient it is. You can just walk around with your cell phone and so on. Well, what happens if you lose your cell phone? But I'm a paper kind of guy. Yes, I do believe in digitalization to some degree. However, what led up to all of this digital ID? Well, this initiative is in fact based on the prompting of you ready for this? The Council of Canadian Innovators and months of consultations with 68 organizations, more than 100 industry experts, and 5 roundtable discussions on that topic. And just very quickly, I'm going to tell you how it works, and I'm going to turn it over to the leader of the Ontario Party, Mr. Derek Sloan. The digital ID will work like this. You will download the app. Secondly, you'll sign up and verify your digital ID online in person. Thirdly, you will add your ID card and credentials to the digital wallet. And then lastly, you'll be able to use your digital ID to easily prove your credentials and access online and in-person services. I raised a very serious question to the Premier of Ontario several weeks ago with regards to this digital ID. And will, in fact, medical records be included on that? Well, there is a video out there. You can go to my website, ricknicholsmpp.ca, and perhaps you can find it. But I will tell you this. I didn't get a clear answer from actually, it wasn't the Premier. He referred it over to the Associate Minister of Digital Government. So again, that will be available to you. But right now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the leader of the Ontario Party, Mr. Derek Sloan. He will be the man that will, in fact, carry us into this election, and we're looking at forming government, and if that doesn't happen, becoming a very reputable opposition party where we can fight for the rights and freedoms of everyone. Derek, over to you.
Thank you for that, Rick. My name is Derek Sloan, leader of the Ontario Party. I'm a former federal member of Parliament as well. And we're very concerned about the imposition of a digital ID. And Rick summed up the concerns very clearly. But I just wanted to try and bring it back to the basics for those who may not know what a digital ID is. And in fact, in a recent survey that was done by the Digital Identity and Authentication Council of Canada, over half of the respondents did not understand the concept of a digital ID. So a digital ID, at least in its infancy, would basically be having an online digital format for your ID, that you could use to open bank accounts, to prove your age, to buy lottery tickets, for example, to do things that you would typically maybe use a driver's license or a passport for. But the issue with that is that, for one, it can be easily expanded to include other things. So it could include medical records and other things being stored in the same online space. It could also, as Rick suggested, there's many governments and central banks that are talking about and actively moving towards digital currencies. So it could be a digital universe online where basically all of your important information is centralized. And there's multiple issues with that. One, there's the possibility for abuse. And we know right now, and we've seen in China, for example, they have a social credit system. And the social credit system is kind of like a credit score, but it covers comprehensively every area of your life. And the social credit system in China is not one monolithic system, although they've pledged to move that way. It's a patchwork of systems. But essentially what it does is, in the same way that a credit score will knock points off you if you don't pay your credit card bills on time, this system here will take points off if they catch you jaywalking with their multitude of cameras that are everywhere, if you misbehave on a train, if you rent too many videos, if you do other activities that they deem to be counter to the public good. And these are real examples that you can read about online. If your credit score gets too low, you can be prevented from riding the bus, going to school at certain locations, even buying plane tickets. There was a famous example of a Chinese civil rights lawyer who was often speaking up against the abuses of the Chinese Communist government, who was unable to buy a plane ticket because his score was so low. And so there is certainly a risk for abuse. We don't want the government to have the ability to turn a switch and immediately be able to turn you off from participating in modern society. We saw some of that quite quickly happen during the trucker convoy, where those who were involved in the trucker convoy had their accounts shut down and they had various other things happen to them. At least right now, we have a court system that, obviously should be providing checks and balances. In the future, the courts will still be there. But if everything is centralized into one particular venue, it provides a perfect recipe for tyranny. And even in this particular case where someone had their bank account shut down, their friends could still loan them cash and things like this. But imagine if all of your cash was digital, your ID was online, and you were shut out from the system. Maybe you participated in a rally that the government didn't like, or maybe you were speaking up against the government, and they shut you off. And in a cashless society, your friend, even though he wants to give you money, would not have the ability to transfer digital currency to you because you, as John Smith, an outsider of the system, would be completely cut off. So that person would not be able to transfer money or help you if you were an outsider. And there's many other ways in which this system could be abused. Let's just say that we experience more draconian lockdowns where they say you can only go 5 kilometers from your home or 10 kilometers from your home. They could literally set that up if the digital ID expands to include your bank accounts and other records to shut you off entirely so that you wouldn't be able to purchase things or do things outside of a certain area around your home. And this may sound conspiratorial or crazy, but these kinds of things similar to this are already in the works in other countries. We've seen draconian overreach in Canada. I can give you some examples. Obviously, we had the trucker convoy where various people without warrants or any other prior notice had their entire lives shut down for a period of time. There is also the risk and the example of government overreach when the Public Health Agency of Canada admitted to monitoring 30 plus million Canadians' whereabouts and activity by monitoring their cell phones. Now, admittedly, they weren't, connecting names to data, but they were looking largely at, what are Canadians doing? Are they following the lockdown protocols? And it would be very easy to go from a general observation to a specific targeting. Hey, so-and-so owns that phone. We need to go after them. So there's many, many different opportunities for abuse that could be seen and are being seen in other countries. There's also security issues. If your entire identity is found online, we all maybe have had a credit card that was compromised or other security issues in our lives before, maybe a password that was stolen. But imagine if your entire life was stolen in the blink of an eye. And I don't think there's any real guarantee to. There's always, of course, hackers that are increasing their ability to access things. And I think that we could easily see a situation where someone's entire identity was stolen. Today, when someone steals your identity, they kind of have a piecework, a patchwork of things. Maybe they know your address and they know your credit card number, and then they can get some things done. But this is a situation where your entire life could be stolen from you. And again, the digital ID is the first step of a long process. And the government, of course, is ensuring us and saying that they're going to be, following all the safety measures and the protocol. But how many times have government said one thing on Monday and a different thing on Tuesday? We had the government claim, Justin Trudeau claimed that a vaccine would be available for anybody who wants them, indicating that if you didn't want it, you didn't have to have it. And we also had our premier say that he was against vaccine passports, as we did with various other premiers in this country, who barely weeks and months later imposed the exact thing that they said that they were against. So I do not trust this government or any government to maintain this particular program in a way that would not be ultimately abusive or potentially even coercive. And we've seen many examples of that throughout COVID-19. And I think we're seeing that in countries like China that have implemented and are far along the road of what a digital ID system would look like. And I believe that's why we as Ontarians need to sound the alarm and stand up before we get to that point. It's a lot easier to prevent an incursion on the rights of Ontarians before it occurs as opposed to after. And that's why our party, myself, Rick Nicholls, and our candidates, the Ontario Party, is against a digital ID. We are against any kind of system that would mimic or be similar to a Chinese communist government social credit system, and we stand strongly against that. And we ask the other parties in the Ontario Legislature to stand with us in opposing a digital ID. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Derek. Now, a couple of other points that I would like to make at this particular time is that you need to understand that Doug Ford and his ministers are actually going to have you believe, that the digital ID system is simply convenient. Well, initially it will go that route, and you see things happening with regards to Service Ontario. but it goes much further than that. Because, you know what, I want to ask you a question. How do you feel about somebody just knowing your name, knowing how many children you have and the names of your children, knowing your spouse or your significant other's name? People know where you live. They know whether or not you are vaccinated or not. Interestingly enough, they are now pushing the 4th shot. Sadly, if you refuse to get the 4th shot, or if you've refused to get the 3rd shot, but you complied with shots 1 and 2, you're now unvaccinated. Well, to me, that's not a true vaccine. It truly isn't. It takes 10 to 15 years to develop a vaccine. However, with this digital ID, people will know everything about you, as Derek has talked about. So again, it's the government themselves are in fact offering you the technology to store your personal information. How wonderful is that, right? And authenticate it with ease with vendors and government services. But the truth is much more nuanced. You know what they say about many convenient services that big tech are offering. If the product is free, you are the product. So my position, as Derek has mentioned, his position and the position of the Ontario Party on digital is not a place of paranoia. In fact, rather, it's based on healthy level of skepticism towards motivations that not only the Ford government, but the government overreach in general. We're seeing way too much government overreach. Do you remember when it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve? And then all of a sudden, four lockdowns later? And now we're on the 4th vaccine shot. It's not a vaccine. They say because they're still injecting the same stuff into you. Anyway, I've already addressed that issue with the Premier and, of course, the Minister of Health. And we talked about natural immunity. But digital ID will, in fact, be a product that the government will use. Once again, it's government overreach. And we need to put a stop to this now. We need you to support us in our endeavor to stop this overreach of digital ID. As I've said in the legislature before, and I've said many times, my personal medical information, your personal medical information, is no one else's business. It should be between you and your medical professionals, and that's it. Derek, do you care to add anything further on this?
Yeah, I'll just add a few comments here. I want to make it clear that what the government is proposing is initially a digital ID, but it could be easily expanded into the other freedom incursions that we highlighted before. It is a testament to the concerns that Ontarians have that within a little over a week of advertising this petition, we have over 20,000 signatures that are all from here in this province. And in Saskatchewan, the government recently tested the waters with the digital ID plan, but withdrew it when it generated significant pushback from the public. So I would like to encourage any Ontarian citizen who's concerned about their digital ID being merged with a broader program of digital identity online that could be used in a coercive or abusive way to email their member of provincial parliament and tell them they're against it and that they need to stand up and push back against any digital ID. This is something that we're seeing in other places around the world, and we need to make sure that we stop this in its tracks now before we have a system where the government can turn the switch and immediately prevent you from accessing all the services that we've become accustomed to in our day and age. And we're coming to the point in time with technology where that is easily possible. We've already seen examples of that at the trucker convoy with people who had their accounts seized without any warrants and things like this. A digital ID paired with a digital currency would make that so much easier. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Derek. And now what I'd like to do is to open it up for any questions that we may have from the media.
I don't have any particular objection to slippery slope arguments, but I would like you to sort of run me through what you see in your head of how we would go from just having a digital ID, which most people probably won't even sign up for or be aware that it exists, do having something like a social credit system like we see in China, which seems to only work because there is an authoritarian government with a singular, like, moral vision for what a proper society would be, which we don't even have anything close of here in Ontario. So you say there's a slippery slope. I'm not seeing how we fall down it to where you say we will be. So can you run me through what you feel would happen step by step?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, part of it is it sort of creates the framework for power to be abused. And in my personal belief is that if you build it, they will come. And whether or not this particular government or the next particular government takes advantage of it in that way, the framework is there. And I think that when the framework is there, the temptation is too great. I would note that generally, we do live in a society right now that is very polarized and divided. And we're seeing governments on both sides stir up the population, where we have, the government saying, the Prime Minister, for example, saying terrible things about the unvaccinated. We have, people saying, well, if you don't get vaccinated, you deserve to die, things like this. These are examples. But the fact is that the climate is there for the government to be able to say, you know what, these people, as Justin Trudeau said, are racist and misogynist, whatever. We have to deal with how much longer do we have to tolerate these people? And when you start speaking like that and you have an infrastructure wherein you could potentially turn the switch off on those people, to me, that's 1 + 1, and all you need now is equals 2. So am I saying it's going to happen tomorrow? No, but when the framework is there, the possibility is there.
Any further questions?
Sure. I mean, I guess building on Alan's question, we already have infrastructure that ties, our identities to various records. I'm thinking like your credit score, you need a SIN number to have a bank account. We have OHIP cards that tie together our medical records. Would you want the government to get rid of those things? Like, that is also, the infrastructure that presumably could be used to kind of build the oppression that you're describing here.
We already have medical document sharing systems between hospitals.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I think our issue is, there's obviously a level of convenience and digitization that we expect. Our concern is the combination of sort of a global singular ID that combines everything with a digital currency, which is being pushed simultaneously along with this kind of concept. So our concern is that you get to the point where it's very easy to literally flip a switch and prevent you from participating in society, which we did see briefly with the trucker convoy, with accounts getting shut down and so on. But I think that this infrastructure would make it that much easier, and that's what we're speaking out against.
Yeah, if I could just add to that as well. We're not opposed to some of the digitalization that is currently out there right now. You raise a good point with regards to medical records. So if someone here in say Toronto goes south, they can access their medical records. It's digitalization. No problem with that at all. It's the government overreach that we're very, very concerned about right now. And it's like, if it's at this point now, how much further will they go? It's kind of like cooking frogs. You put a frog in a pan on the stove. The water's kind of cold. The frog isn't going to jump out. But you turn the heat up just slowly, and next thing you know, as they say, the frog wakes up dead. And so we just don't want to see that happen either. I'm not suggesting people are going to die here, but my point is that it's you used the word earlier, a slippery slope, and I concur with that as well. We have to be very, very careful. It's kind of like go slow to go fast. And we don't like the direction in which this government, the Ford government, is heading us right now.
Yeah, and I would point out, a lot of the examples you guys are giving are again, siloed. When we're talking about health records, when we're talking about transferring them between hospitals, that's in the context of healthcare. That's in the context of, personally giving your approval to transfer your information from A to B. Our issue, and we've already seen this with the vaccine passport, is that your health information can be connected to a digital ID that can be available for anybody to view. And when you combine that with other elements of your life, your credit score, your online status, all of these things, which again are very easy to do. And I think that we can get to the point where all of your information is in one area, and I think that poses a risk from a security perspective at the very least, but also a government abuse and coercion perspective as well.
There's a lot of hackers out there as well. People are worried about that. Any other question? Time for one more question.
We got all the time in the world,
on the
guys.
cryptocurrency idea.
Which is actually slightly different than what we were saying, but go on. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if a need for a way to verify people's identity using cryptocurrency is going to be a prerequisite for like widespread adoption. So I mean, you're not really allowed to go and create a bank account without giving a name. So why would cryptocurrency be any different? So
just to clarify, cryptocurrency is actually much different than what we're saying. So one of the things that central banks are proposing as sort of maybe it's even an antidote to cryptocurrency, is a centralized digital currency, which is not the same as cryptocurrency, which is decentralized, largely anonymous in many cases. So this would be a centralized digital currency, which is not the same as cryptocurrency. So what we're saying is that if our currency issuance becomes solely digital, which we're on that path, and it gets paired with a digital ID, you have a situation that's ripe for security or governmental coercion and abuse.
And this is, not related to what you're announcing today, but as, with an election coming up and your hopes to gain seats and form government, it's, we know from just past experience that it's extremely difficult for independent parties to break into government. Your sitting MPPs are people who left the PC party. What happens to the Ontario Party if you don't win any seats come June?
That's a really good question. So it is true. It is true that historically it's very hard for independents or non-mainstream parties to win. But I also believe that the atmosphere right now in Canada is such that many people are disenfranchised with the mainstream parties. And whether we win or don't win or win many seats or a few seats or no seats, we're going to use this as a building block to move forward. And federally, we just saw an election where the People's Party, which is only a few years old, got over 5% of the national vote, which is a significant percentage. So they beat the Green Party. So we are in an environment now where there's openings. But listen, the other parties have had decades, if not centuries, to build their brand name and their appeal. And we're not in this for just a short-term fight. We're in this for the long term as well.
I might also add to that as well. One of the things that we, as the Ontario Party, my party, Derek's party, what we want to do with the province is we need to kind of build from the ground level up. Well, what does that look like? Well, our foundational pillars include truth, includes transparency, it includes faith, the respect of one's faith, family and family values. We look at freedoms, and of course we saw how freedoms are taken away. And lastly, fiscal responsibility. So look, truth, transparency, faith, family, freedoms, and fiscal responsibility. Because right now we feel that the current government, you talk about spending, every day they're making several announcements, spending your money, the taxpayers' money, and for what? To me, it's become very, very obvious. The Doug Ford government is spending like a liberal. And they have moved the PC party from right of center to left of center. And we, as the Ontario Party, are a true conservative party. And that's how we would govern as well.
You know how many candidates you're running this election yet?
Yeah, so we're still adding candidates every day. It'll be likely in the range of between 80 to 100 candidates, but that's still the team is being built.
Have you made any headway with any cooperation with like New Blue at all?
It's a good question. We have not. We have reached out to them on multiple occasions. We've publicly released a proposal that we sent to them, but they don't appear to be willing to work together or to talk further.
Does Randy Hillier's leaving politics change the calculus for you guys in the election?
Not really. Obviously, we wish Randy the best, and he's had some legal battles recently. It's very possible Randy Hillier may endorse one of the parties, but it is a fact that Randy had initially wanted to lead a movement, and of course our party was in discussions with him behind the scenes. But I suppose it means that it's a two-horse race in the sort of freedom sphere, or whatever sphere it is that you want to call our sphere, and it'll be up to voters to decide which is the better option.
Mr. Hillier is a polarizing figure. Do you want his endorsement?
I would be happy to have Randy Hillier's endorsement. I would say that obviously Randy Hillier and I agree about many of the same values. Our tactics are not the same, and that's fine. We're all different people. But I do believe that Randy Hillier has done a great work in terms of raising awareness about the damaging effects of lockdowns, and in terms of rallying Canadians around that point. And I thank him for that.
No more questions. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Appreciate it. Take care.